All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a story today that is, honestly, it's completely unique in modern history. India's evolution to independence. Instead of just giving you a broad, high-level overview, we're going to break down the exact escalating chain of events that eventually made British rule utterly unsustainable. We'll be relying entirely on the facts and figures from our source material to see how every major action by the empire provoked an even more powerful reaction.
To make sense of over a century of incredibly complex history, we've structured this explainer into 5 distinct eras. We'll start with 1857, the first spark, then look at political awakening and Congress, Mahatma Gandhi and mass movements, the fierce struggle of revolutionaries, and finally, towards complete independence. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, 1857, the first spark.
Picture this: decades of simmering tension finally hitting an absolute boiling point. By the mid-19th century, the East India Company just wasn't satisfied with indirect control anymore. So Lord Dalhousie introduces this highly aggressive policy called the Doctrine of Lapse. Essentially, if a native ruler died without a biological son, their adopted heir was out of luck. The kingdom lapsed directly into British hands. They annexed Satara in 1848, Jhansi in 1853, which sparked the legendary resentment of Rani Lakshmi Bai, and Awadh in 1856. They were literally pushing native rulers to the absolute brink.
And to put the situation into perspective, just think about the military ratio before the 1857 revolt. For every 1 British soldier, there were 6 native Indian soldiers. That's roughly 45,000 British soldiers surrounded by 238,000 Indians. The British were placing immense, yet completely fragile military power right into the hands of the very people they were exploiting. Talk about a ticking time bomb, right?
So, you might be wondering, what actually lit the fuse? Well, 1857 wasn't just about one thing. It was this massive powder keg of those annexations, new laws interfering with religious customs, and a devastating string of 12 famines across the country. But the final spark? That was the new Enfield rifle. Rumor had it that the bullet cartridges, which soldiers had to physically bite open, were greased with cow and pig fat. There's this crazy pivotal story from Dum Dum in January 1857. A Brahmin sepoy refused to let a lower caste Halasi drink water from his pot, citing caste rules. The Halasi basically taunted him, saying, the British are going to make you bite cartridges coated in animal fat soon anyway. That one mini-story spread like wildfire, convincing both Hindu and Muslim sepoys that the British were actively trying to destroy their religions.
Which brings us to a defining moment on March 29, 1857. Mangal Pandey, a lone sepoy in Barrackpore, refused to fall in line, outright declaring that he would shoot any Englishman he saw. He fired the first literal shot of the rebellion, injuring a British officer. Now, the British tried to brush it off, claiming he was just intoxicated on bhang, but it was way too late for damage control. The mutiny spread rapidly to Meerut, Delhi, and beyond, kicking off a massive chain reaction.
Moving on to Section 2, Political Awakening and Congress.
After the British brutally suppressed the 1857 revolt, the British Crown took direct control over India. And this birthed an entirely new, organized, and intellectual form of resistance. In 1885, a retired British officer named A.O. Hume actually helped 72 educated Indians form the Indian National Congress. Now, why on earth would a British officer do that? Enter the safety valve theory. As later described by leader Lala Lajpat Rai, the theory suggests the British deliberately facilitated the creation of the Congress to act exactly like a safety valve on a pressure cooker. They wanted a safe way to release the building political pressure of the Indian middle class, so they'd never have to face another violent 1857-style explosion.
But, you can't keep a lid on that kind of pressure forever. Soon enough, a massive ideological split tore the Congress apart. On one side, you had the moderates, the Naram Dol, who strictly believed in pray, protest, petition within legal British limits. On the flip side were the extremists, the Garam Dol. These younger leaders realized that politely petitioning wasn't doing much, while millions were dying in famines. They wanted strikes, boycotts, and direct action to hit the British where it actually hurt, their profits. The tension built up until the 1907 Surat session, where things got so unbelievably heated between the two factions that shoes and chairs were literally thrown across the stage, completely splitting the party.
All right, Section 3, Mahatma Gandhi and Mass Movements.
Fast forward to 1915. Gandhi returns from South Africa and totally flips the script on the struggle. Before him, political resistance was basically confined to elite drawing rooms and highly educated lawyers. But Gandhi took the fight straight to the streets and the fields. In Champaran, he organized farmers who were being forced to grow indigo. In Ahmedabad, he led a hunger strike for mill workers demanding a plague bonus. In Quetta, he rallied farmers who were being heavily taxed during a severe drought. His strategy of satyagraha, passive resistance and civil disobedience, showed everyday Indians that if they simply united without fear, even the mighty British Empire would have to back down.
But how did the British react to the sudden, massive unity? Well, with sheer tyranny. In 1919, they passed the incredibly draconian Rala Act. This law allowed the government to throw suspected activists in jail for 2 years without a trial. The rallying cry instantly became Na Dalil, Na Vakal, Na Appeal, meaning no argument, no lawyer, no appeal. It stripped away fundamental legal rights and sparked massive strikes across the entire nation.
And the British retaliation to those peaceful protests was just horrific. On April 13, 1919, thousands of unarmed people gathered peacefully in Jallianwala Bagh in Punjab. General Dyer deliberately blocked the only exit and ordered his troops to open fire on the crowd. The official British report claimed 400 dead, but locals documented that 120 bodies were recovered from just a single well inside the compound. It was an absolute massacre that shattered any remaining illusion of British justice.
In direct response to that trauma, Gandhi launched the non-cooperation movement, uniting millions of Indians to boycott British schools, courts, and goods. But then, in 1922, something unexpected happened. An angry mob in Chauri Chaura retaliated against police violence by setting a police station on fire, killing 22 officers. Gandhi was so unyieldingly committed to non-violence that he abruptly called off the entire nationwide movement right then and there. This sudden, screeching halt left millions confused and created a massive void in the struggle.
Which naturally leads us to Section 4, Fierce Struggle of Revolutionaries. With mass peaceful protests effectively on pause, a new group stepped into the spotlight. These were young men who believed freedom couldn't be politely requested. It had to be seized by force. But to fight an empire, you need money and weapons. So young revolutionaries like Ram Prasad Bismil, part of the Hindustan Republican Association, took action. In August 1925, they halted a train near Kakori and looted precisely 4,601 rupees straight from government coffers. The British cracked down incredibly hard, ultimately hanging Bismil and several others, but their defiance deeply inspired the youth across the country.
What followed was a breathtakingly rapid action-reaction cycle. In October 1928, the highly respected extremist leader Lala Lajpat Rai was severely beaten during a peaceful protest against the Simon Commission, and he later died from those injuries. A young Bhagat Singh and his allies swore they would get revenge. By December, they assassinated British officer Saunders, though, interestingly, it was actually a case of mistaken identity for the man who ordered the beating. Still, by April 1929, they escalated things even further by bombing the Central Assembly in Delhi. But here's the absolute kicker about that assembly bombing. It was not designed to kill anyone. Bhagat Singh and his allies deliberately threw the bombs into empty spaces in the hall, and then they just stood their ground shouting Inqilab Zindabad, which means long live the revolution. They actually wanted to get arrested. They were smart enough to know that their upcoming court trials would be plastered across every newspaper in the country, effectively giving them a national microphone to broadcast their revolutionary ideals to all of India.
And finally, Section 5, Towards Complete Independence. By the late 1920s and early 30s, the goalposts had permanently shifted. For years, older Indian leaders had been asking for dominion status, like what was in the 1928 Nehru Report. That basically meant India would govern itself but technically still be a subject of the British Empire. Younger leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose absolutely rejected that. By December 1929, the Congress officially upgraded its demand to Purna Swaraj, meaning complete and total independence. The British had to pack up and leave completely. There was absolutely no going back.
To rally the entire nation behind this massive new goal, Gandhi needed an issue that touched every single person, rich or poor, and he found it in salt. The British held a strict, punishing monopoly on salt production. So in 1930, Gandhi marched 390 kilometers from Sabarmati to Dandi over 24 days. By the time he reached the ocean to illegally pick up a handful of salt, he had united the entire country. Over 60,000 people were thrown in jail, completely proving to the British that the Indian masses were no longer afraid.
And while Gandhi is pushing relentlessly from the inside, Subhash Chandra Bose is taking a completely different, almost cinematic approach from the outside during World War II. Bose strongly disagreed with Gandhi's strict nonviolence, so the British put him under house arrest. But he manages to escape in disguise, travels all the way to Germany to seek alliances, and eventually makes his way to Japan.
There, he literally takes charge of the Indian National Army, building an actual military force out of captured Indian soldiers, fully intent on fighting the British Empire from the outside in. So it all leaves us with a pretty profound question. Did India eventually win its freedom through the relentless, crushing pressure of Gandhi's mass nonviolence? Or was it the terrifying, unstoppable escalation of armed revolution by figures like Bhagat Singh and Bose? As we've seen from our source material today, the reality is that both of these radically different ideologies were working simultaneously. They attacked the very foundation of the British Empire from completely different angles, organically combining to make foreign rule absolutely impossible to sustain. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning history.